Very much for the introduction and for the invitation of speaking here. 15 minutes is very short, and of course I could talk about what we've been doing in the last almost 30 years, but that's impossible in 15 minutes. So I was rather thinking of the question, why do we do it? What do we learn from the work, from the discovery of paintings, texts, and all kinds of other information from this church building? And to my opinion, it has to do with cultural heritage, because that is what this church is, and cultural identity. The identity of who are the people that have been building this church, who are the people who are using the church, and who are the people who will be using this church in the future. There is a contact between these two things. It's cultural identity and cultural heritage are closely connected, and they influence each other mutually. History shapes the identity of community. People become what they are because of what has happened in the past. But what also happens is that from the point of view where we are standing now, we are looking back into the past. And this is very often an image which is not unbiased. And we can look at the past maybe from a point of view that has been too much influenced by certain experiences. A reinterpretation of history and of cultural heritage, I think, can lead to a new version of cultural identity, and that is something that has a value for the future. And as an example, because this is a very general question, as an example, I take the monastery of Del Suyan. It's called the Syrian monastery, or the monastery of the Syrians. On the other hand, it was inhabited by Coptic monks. So what is going on here? Is or was it a Coptic monastery or a Syriac monastery, or both? And does it matter what Syrians and Copts have been doing there? I think it does matter. And first of all, by looking back into the history of the monastery, I would like to dedicate a few words to what has shaped Christianity and what is the cultural identity of Christians and the Coptic Church in Egypt. In 2000 years, all kinds of things have happened, dramatic events have happened that have shaped the Coptic Church as it exists nowadays. We start with the first 3 centuries. We see that Christianity in Egypt arrives in Alexandria probably already in the very first beginning of the first century. And that at that moment Alexandria is the cultural and intellectual center of the Mediterranean. So Christianity in Alexandria is more than just a local diocese. It is a movement that develops under the influence of what the intellectuals of Alexandria have to offer, both Christians and non-Christians, and there is a strong interaction. And this defines the importance and the enormous influence that the Christian Church of Alexandria has. On the other hand, we see that the persecution of the Diocletian is a very influential fact in the history of Christianity in Egypt. It's not a coincidence that the Coptic calendar starts with the first year of reign of Diocletian. So here we have already 2 currents that oppose each other. The enormous influence of Neoplatonism on the early church fathers in Alexandria. On the other hand, the struggle of the early Christian church with the persecution of Diocletian. Then we see that after the Council of Nicaea, everything seems to be okay and wonderful and great. The Alexandria becomes an official patriarchate, and its influence is spreading all over the Mediterranean, not just in Egypt. But on the other hand, we see that there is a break on this development when Constantine and his sons at a certain moment developed certain sympathies for Arenas and his thought, which leads to a conflict with Athanasius. And again, we see that Alexandria and its Christian culture come into conflict with Constantinople, and that things are, let's say, not developing in a way that it would have been ideally possible. The Council of Chalcedon, then in 451, is maybe the most eventful happening in the history of Christianity in Egypt. There is a conflict that turns into a schism, and that leads to an isolation of the church in Egypt, which, let's say, from the centuries to follow, will be identified as the Coptic Church. The Arab conquest means another infringement on cultural development of Christian church in Egypt. And in spite of that, you see that Christian culture survives and flourishes, although there are some very severe ups and downs, and especially, of course, in the later period, the 15th, 16th centuries onwards, are particularly difficult. The 19th century sees a Coptic church that can hardly survive, where illiteracy is enormous. And then at that moment we see that Westerners are arriving in Egypt. That's, for instance, Protestant missionaries initially coming here to convert Muslims, but after not succeeding in that, turn their attention to the Egyptian Christians. And again you see that the Coptic Church has to do with this, well, let's call it rivalry, conflict, in this case with Christians from another denomination. And that creates an image of the Coptic Church that is constantly under siege by pagans, heretics and Muslims. And this is, I think, an image of the Coptic Church that many Copts project on themselves. So when we talk about cultural identity, and we look back in the past 2,000 years, this image may prevail. The Christian community under siege. One of the first times I stayed in the guest house of Prof. in Wadi Natsun, I was presented with this booklet written by His Holiness. Comparative theology, and I started reading full of expectation, and soon I discovered that it is in fact a question and answer text in which the rituals and sacraments of the Coptic Church are compared to the habits of the Protestants, showing that the Protestants are wrong and that the Coptic Church is right. Being a Protestant myself, I was slightly disappointed, but later on I understood that this is also, let's say, an understandable reaction against this image of the church under siege, not only from all kinds of others, non-Christians, but also under siege from Protestant missionaries in the 19th century. Then Del Sudan. Not so long ago, I read a post on Facebook of someone who wrote about the discoveries of the paintings of Del Sudan, and he wrote more or less, and now I'm summarizing, that this was a Coptic monastery, and then the Syrians arrived, and the Syrians painted over all the beautiful Coptic paintings and made their own paintings, but fortunately, after a while, the Syrians left again, and the monastery is now Coptic again. So, what we see here is an interpretation of these multiple layers of wall paintings in the monastery from the point of view of someone who feels that there is a constant rivalry of communities, in this case, Copts versus Syrians. What really happened in the monastery is in fact something completely different, and the past decades of work here have taught us that Del Sudan was a unique place, a crossroads of cultures, a place where Syrians, Copts lived together, exchanged their knowledge, where manuscripts were being translated, where people would come and go, would acquire manuscripts for the library, which were then again made public to visitors. In other words, a place where there was no rivalry between communities. On the other hand, we have lots of information that shows that the monastery was an important hub, exchange of knowledge, and not only for Syrians and Copts, but also for monks, visitors of many other nationalities. The result was that from time to time paintings were added to the church until the moment that the quality declined and paintings started flaking off the wall, fell down, so that renovation was necessary, compared with wall painting, wallpaper that has to be renewed every now and then. So there is no question of iconoclasm here, it is an addition, and the multiple layers on the other hand rather show the cultural richness of the monastery than the need of one community to eliminate the works of others. In the past weeks, we have been working again, not only on wall painting, but a group of epigraphists has been working on the text of the walls. Several hundreds of inscriptions have been documented in Syriac, Coptic, Greek, Arabic, Ethiopic, Armenian, Latin, and even in Old Nubian. That shows that people from literally all over the world, all over the Christian world, came to this monastery, were welcomed here, could learn and could leave again to share their experiences. That gives a completely different image, and we see that although we cannot deny that the Christianity in Egypt has been dealing with rival Greeks, with opposition, with all kinds of problems, but nevertheless a place like Sudan from the 7th until the 16th century was a place where people from all nationalities were welcomed and where knowledge was exchanged. So, as a conclusion, I would say that the Patriarchate of Alexandria gradually lost its international position and came to an isolated position, and that the Coptic Church, as a result, has often seen itself as a besieged minority. In Del Sudan, we see that the small monastery could keep playing the role of a gateway between Egypt and the outside world. And I think that this opening up of the Coptic Church nowadays is a process that is very promising. Several denominations are dealing with Coptic art. People from many different nationalities come to Egypt and study Coptic heritage. And also within Egypt, the study of Coptic heritage is not limited only to members of the Coptic Orthodox Church. In other words, I think a new look at the past can give us hope and promises for the future. Thank you very much.